Hi, very good afternoon to everyone. I'm Dr. Jalakshmi. I'm going to discuss acute flaccid paralysis. Okay. First thing is we should know the importance of acute flaccid paralysis and what's the importance in society. Okay. So in AFP, we'll discuss regarding introduction, motor unit, and then differential diagnosis and AFP surveillance. So first thing is in 1988, WHO has assembled and then a resolution was passed to eradicate polio. Okay, in that global polio eradicative initiative, AFP was defined as child less than 15 years with acute onset of AFP for which no obvious cause is found or in any case of or in any person with irrespective of age where poliomyelitis is suspected. So acute flaccid paralysis is a clinical syndrome characterized by progressing loss of weakness and then it reaches from maximum severity within several days to weeks. So flaccid is absence of spasticity and then we have few terms like acute. In this, paralysis means less than 4 weeks duration and then flaccid means loss of spasticity or floppy or limb. And then we should know the terms background rate of AFP. In this, non-polio cases of AFP will consider, okay? So one case of AFP for every 1 lakh of children in less than 15 years we have to take. And then importance of this in detail I'll discuss later. So first thing is we have to know motor unit, okay? So in motor unit, any lesions at any level, it can cause acute flaccid paralysis. So lesions can be at the level of spinal cord and then anterior horn cells and then neuron and then neuromuscular junction and muscle fibers. So conditions causing AFP are muscular causes like myoglobinuric myopathy and then hypokalemic paralysis, toxic paralysis, myopathy of intensive care and then inflammatory myopathy and then infections. Neuromuscular junction causes like myasthenia gravis, botulism, hypermagnesemia and Eaton-Lambert syndrome. And then peripheral nerve causes like Guillain-Barré syndrome, post-diphtheritic neuropathy, and then porphyria, vasculitis, traumatic neuritis, lead neuropathy, hyperphosphatemia, cobalamin deficiency. Next is anterior horn cells. So poliomyelitis or non-polio enterovirus causing AFP. And then spinal cord lesions like transverse myelitis and then spinal cord compression and trauma. And then other causes which we should inform to as AFP, they are isolated facial palsy and then Bell's palsy, traumatic neuritis and then flaccid, flaccid hemiplegias, next Todd's paralysis and then floppy neck and then Todd's paralysis and then unproved hypokalemia. Okay, these are also conditions we should inform as AFP. Okay, and then these four are very important: poliomyelitis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, and transverse myelitis and traumatic neuritis. Okay, mostly these four are very important. Okay, so in history we'll have to ask progression to full paralysis. In poliomyelitis it is 24 to 48 hours and then in Guillain-Barré syndrome hours to days and then in transverse myelitis it's hours to 4 days. Next in traumatic neuritis it's hours to 4 days and then fever onset. Biphasic type of fever is seen in poliomyelitis, high always present at onset of paralysis and then fever is absent in Guillain-Barré syndrome and then in transverse myelitis present before paralysis. In traumatic neuritis fever is absent and then bladder dysfunction. In poliomyelitis it's absent. In Guillain-Barré syndrome it is transient due to autonomic nervous involvement and then in transverse myelitis also it's present. Next in traumatic neuritis bladder dysfunction is not seen. And then flaccidity, it is acute, asymmetrical and proximal in poliomyelitis, whereas in Guillain-Barré syndrome, it is acute, symmetrical, distal ascending type, also known as Landry's ascending type of paralysis. And then transverse myelitis, we have acute, symmetrical lower limb involvement is there. Then in traumatic neuritis, acute asymmetrical involvement is there. Muscle tone is diminished in poliomyelitis, diminished in Guillain-Barré syndrome, and diminished in lower limbs in case of transverse myelitis, and then diminished in it is only in that segment in case of traumatic neuritis. And then deep tendon reflexes. They are absent or decreased in poliomyelitis, absent in Guillain-Barré syndrome, and then absent early and then later on hyperreflexia is seen in transverse myelitis. And then in traumatic neuritis, deep tendon reflexes decreased or absent. Next is sensations. Severe myalgia and backache are seen in poliomyelitis. No sensory changes are seen. And then in Guillain-Barré syndrome, cramps, tingling, and hypoanesthesia palms and soles are seen. In transverse myelitis, anesthesia of lower limb with sensory level involvement. And then in traumatic neuritis, pain in gluteal region is seen. Next, cranial nerves. Only when bulbar and bulbospinal in type of poliomyelitis only cranial nerve involvement is there. Mostly in 90 to 99.5%, they are asymptomatic. And then in case of Guillain-Barré syndrome, the affected cranial nerves are 7, 9, 10, 11, and 12. In transverse myelitis, cranial nerves not involved, and then traumatic neuritis also not involved. Respiratory insufficiency is seen in only when bulbo and bulbospinal paralytic forms of poliomyelitis. In Guillain-Barré syndrome, in respiratory efficiency is severely involved. Okay? Then in transverse myelitis, sometimes it is seen. In traumatic neuritis, respiratory insufficiency is absent. CSF examination. In case of poliomyelitis, we'll see only high leukocytosis, normal or slightly increased protein. Whereas in Guillain-Barré syndrome, CSF only less than 10 leukocytes are seen, and then high protein is seen. This is known as albuminocytological dissociation. And then in transverse myelitis, cellular or acellular, and then normal or slightly increased protein. In traumatic neuritis, CSF examination is normal. And then EMG at 3 weeks. It is abnormal in case of poliomyelitis, normal in case of Guillain-Barré syndrome, and then normal in transverse myelitis. And then in traumatic neuritis, maybe it can show any abnormality. And then nerve conduction velocity at 3 weeks. In poliomyelitis, it is normal. In Guillain-Barré syndrome, abnormal demyelination or axonal damage is seen. And then in case of transverse myelitis, it's normal. And then traumatic neuritis, nerve conduction velocities of sciatic nerve, they are abnormal. And then sequelae at 3 months. Those are severe. In case of poliomyelitis, severe asymmetrical atrophy with skeletal deformities can be seen. And then in Guillain-Barré syndrome, symmetrical atrophy of distal muscles, recovery is seen in milder cases. In transverse myelitis, diplegia, atrophy after years, recovery in milder cases is seen. And then in traumatic neuritis, moderate atrophy in the affected limb is seen. Next, AFP surveillance. So all cases we have to report to surveillance medical officer of WHO. Okay, and then all these classified as polio and non-polio. And then high sensitivity of reporting will ensure detection of all cases, resulting in control measures to interrupt transmission. Okay, and then two critical indicators of quality of surveillance, they are rate of non-polio AFP and then proportion of AFP cases with two adequate stools collected within 14 days of onset of paralysis. After 14 days of paralysis, virus isolation from stool sample is very less, and then after 60 days, it's of no use. So the overall indicators and targets, the bottom line on AFP surveillance are number of non-polio AFP cases reported yearly. It should be more than 1 per 1 lakh children under 15 years of age. And then percentage of cases with two adequate stool samples taken within 24 hours apart, okay, it should be more than 80%. These indicators show the sensitivity of AFP. And then acute flaccid paralysis surveillance. We'll deal in these topics, finding and reporting children with acute flaccid paralysis, transporting stool samples for analysis, isolating poliovirus, and then mapping the virus. So case notification is from where we'll get these cases. First thing is from referral units, clinics, and then private practitioners, and then who reports, nodal person or any informer from these places. And then when immediately on seeing any AFP case like traumatic neuritis, poliomyelitis, transverse myelitis, and GBS. Next, other causes like isolated facial palsy, Bell's palsy, floppy baby, neck flop, improved hypokalemia, flaccid diplegias, okay, and then encephalitis. These has to be reported to surveillance medical officer, okay. They will come within 48 hours and then they will take in detail history and then examination and then they will they do surveillance of that particular area. And then fastest mode of communication is through phone or fax. And then we have to give information regarding name, address of that person, and then date of onset of paralysis. Why? Because within 48 hours, we should inform to surveillance medical officer. And then now where the patient has been given treatment, it also to be notified. So in case investigation, we'll deal as stool sample collection and then stool sample results, 60 days follow-up and then special investigation if indicated and then final classification. So in stool, important is stool sample collection. Okay, we have to take stool samples within 24 hours apart and within 14 days of onset of paralysis, we have to take stool sample. After 14 days until 60 days, we can take sample, but very less significance. And after 60 days, it's of no use. So we have to take 8 to 10 grams of stool sample and it should be of adult, equivalent to adult thumb size. And then we have to take voided stool sample. And then in case of a child with the constipation or if anyone dies, we have to do digital extraction method. And then if during postmortem, we can collect large intestine collections or through passing a rectal tube. We should never use enema or proctoclysis for stool sample collection. And then it should be collected in a clean wide mouth bottle of plastic or glass with a screw cap, and then sample should be stored below 8 degrees. Then no desiccation or leakage till sample is received at WHO accredited lab. If paralysis is detected after 2 weeks, samples taken after 6 days from onset. And then contact sampling. It is done when child has died without adequate stool sampling. We will do only 5 children in close contact with the child who are taken, and then single stool sample is enough. So stool sample transport. Maintenance of cold chain from collecting point to the time it reaches by lab by vaccine carrier. We'll call it as reverse cold chain. And then no leakage or proper labeling and packing should be done. Vaccine carrier once used for transporting stool, it should be disposed of. Okay, we shouldn't use for any purpose. And then after this, simultaneously we have to do environmental surveillance. Environmental surveillance, it involves testing of sewage or other environmental samples for the presence of poliovirus. Next, in India, last case was detected in 2011, okay, in West Bengal. And then we have to do classification of AFP as wild polio AFP and then non-wild polio, okay. So if wild polio virus is isolated, we have to confirm it as wild polio, and then polio review expert committee is there, and then they will decide whether it is compatible or non-compatible. And then if no wild virus is detected, it due to inadequate or no specimen, and then we'll follow up after 60 days. If no residual weakness is there, we will discard. And then if 2 adequate stool specimens are there, even though if no wild virus isolation is there, we will discard. And then if residual weakness or the person must have died or lost follow-up, we have to do expert review committee, and then we have to prove it as compatible or non-compatible. Next thing is clinical AFP. Okay, so we'll do after 60 days, we'll just follow up the patient. If anyone has lost follow up, we'll just declare it as compatible or non-compatible depending on prior results. And then we have to follow up at 60 days. If there is still residual paralysis, we have to confirm it as compatible or non-compatible, and then no residual paralysis is there. And then if it is positive for wild poliovirus, we have to confirm it as polio, and then if no residual paralysis, then we have to discard it as non-polio. So these are the sequence of actions to be taken after detecting a case of AFP. First thing is acute onset of paralysis, and then within 48 hours we have to inform to surveillance medical officer, and then they will visit the patient, and then in detail they will take the history and then examination and then stool sample collection. And then if AFP is due to any cause of trauma or electrolyte imbalance, it will be discarded. Only unproved hypokalemia, it comes under AFP, okay? Not other hypokalemias. And then two adequate stool specimens should be collected. And then within 3 days, it has to be sent to National Laboratory. And then report has to be done within 28 days, okay? So first thing is after receiving sample, there are two cell lines. First thing is RD cell lines where they are grown, they are isolated from human, derived from human rhabdomyosarcoma cells, where only enterovirus they are isolated. And then after that, L20B cell lines where only poliovirus is isolated. And then after that, we have to do using anti-sera, we have to do neutralizing test to determine which types of poliovirus, type 1, 2, 3. And then we have to do intratyping to know whether it is wild polio or non or not a vaccine derived polio, okay? And then if it is wild derived polio, we have to do genetic sequencing, okay? And then after collecting samples, we have to do outbreak response and then immunization of all children less than 5 years, and then active surveillance we have to do, okay? Next thing is 60 days follow up we have to do to see any residual paralysis, but not more than 70 days, okay? And then we have to do final classification of case within 90 days. So AFP surveillance is in the end the only indicator for success. If any doubts are there, you can mail to Dr. Jaya 3105 at the rate of gmail.com. Okay. Thank you.